The Extremis Publishing podcast is endorsed by Heart 200, Scotland's most exciting road trip. Find out more at heart200.scot.
Hello and welcome to the Extremis Publishing podcast. I'm Tom Christie. I'm delighted to be joined today by Stirling Council archaeologist Dr Murray Cook, who's the author of, amongst many other things, Digging into Stirling's Past and the Anvil of Scottish History.
Hi Tom, how are you doing?
I'm doing fine, thanks Murray. It's good to be here and good to join you today to talk about your brand new book, Bannockburn and Stirling Bridge, Exploring Scotland's Two Greatest Battles.
Yes, well thank you very much for that, Tom. I have to say, of the books I've written, this was the one I enjoyed the most, actually. It's just actually fascinating. Once you research the battles, you realise what happened, what survives on the ground, the impact that it has on Scottish culture, and actually how easy it is to explore these if you're in Stirling.
Because that's an intriguing thing, isn't it? You think of the Wars of Independence as being these huge nation-shaping events, which they were, but you don't often think of the really tangible ways that they impacted on areas like Stirling and the surrounding region.
Yes, I mean and of course I think for the non-Scottish history reader, there are two Wars of Independence. Both have a massive impact on Stirling. Stirling's economy collapses because of the Wars of Independence, and actually it isn't just Bannockburn and it isn't just Stirling Bridge. Those are very much in the first half. There's actually 60 odd years worth of conflict, and in effect the first Wars of Independence run between the Battle of Dunbar 1296 and then the Treaty of Edinburgh in 1428. Bruce dies a year later, and you've actually got then the second Wars of Independence, and prior to that you actually had the death of Alexander III, so you've actually got almost two generations of chaos, and because Stirling was strategically so important and also a relatively recent addition to the Scottish nation, indeed as late as the 15th century, Bannockburn is described as being on the border with England because the Lothians were part of Northumbria. So all of this on the ground, all of this huge impact, but actually try to find out about it when you're here in Stirling is tricky. And for me, I always remember seeing an American tourist stop me in the street and ask me how to find Bannockburn, and he didn't want the National Trust Visitor Centre because he knew enough that was just day one. He actually wanted to find day two, and it was tricky. I mean, I knew how to get there, but how to describe it to him. So this book is in part a response to that.
Well, one of the things I really enjoyed about the book is the way that it unpacks so many different figures and personalities from the time. I'm sure we'll all be familiar with King Robert the Bruce and William Wallace, but the way that you bring to life people like the Earl of Atholl with his charge at Randolph Field, the Boon attacking Bruce, people like that, it really helps to bring alive a real tapestry of history beyond just the events that perhaps we're most familiar with. Yes,
I mean, you just can't conceive of the kind of in-depth tapestry of all this stuff. Stirling changes hands more times than any other castle in the Wars of Independence. There's this incredible period in 1304. Edward I brings the Warwolf, the largest trebuchet ever built, and makes a point of systematically destroying part of the castle before he allows the keeper to surrender. This chap suffers clearly PTSD and ends up working for Edward in defending Perth against Robert the Bruce. Robert the Bruce, this complicated Machiavellian character, at the time of 1304, he actually supplies materials to the Warwolf. He is officially on Edward I's side, but is secretly discussing beginning again the war against Edward, but falls out with the Red Comyn, who's actually the more solid leader of the Scottish independence. And again, around this time, you have the peace treaty that Edward gets people to sign. Comyn and Bruce have both signed. It's only Wallace that actually is still fighting for Scotland's cause, and his capture and ultimately his horrific evisceration in Smithfield is Edward's price for peace. Absolutely incredible. And then Stirling spends the next 10 years being an English garrison town. So you can imagine friendships, children, marriages, relations. I mean, think of the repercussions after Vichy France, when everybody got back in charge. That's half the time. There's a much greater issue here. And when Robert the Bruce does capture Stirling Castle again, or rather, when he's handed the keys, he burns the castle. He does leave. We think he leaves the chapel upstanding, but he burns it down and then abandons Stirlingshire and rebuilds north of the Forth. So in effect, he's letting this becomes a no-go zone. It becomes an area raided and rampaged over left, right, and centre. But people still have to live their lives. The castle itself, when you go, is smaller and more focused round. All the later outworks are 18th century, so you're going back probably to beyond James IV's monumental towers, which when you go you'll see are the kind of the slightly stumpy towers with arrow slits. So clearly the trebuchet either has to be in the Valley Cemetery or in the Esplanade where the car park is. There are then two rocky prominences. There's Ladies Rock and there's another one in Snowdon Cemetery. And we have a description that Edward I builds a tower for his queen to show off the impact. So where else does Edward stand unless he wants if he wants an elevated view? There are only two hills, the one in the Snowdon Cemetery and then Ladies Rock. And even if he didn't stand there for long, he certainly stood there for some time. He has to survey the castle and figure out his plan of attack. And if the trebuchet is to be used to pull down the walls in order to allow foot troops over, it has to be from that side. There's no point in doing it from below. These are the only conceivable locations to attack.
Now your book is fully illustrated with really striking colour imagery, and the ones that really stand out to me are the reproductions of what Stirling Castle and the surrounding area would have looked like at that point, because really it was a very different structure in comparison to the Stuart era building that we know today.
Well, I should here draw attention that these reconstructions were done by the wonderful Bob Marshall, who kindly let me reuse them and are going to feature in the new exhibition at the castle, and Bob Marshall's website is well worth having a look at. So yes, that castle, so we probably think this is a castle built by Edgar the First, certainly expanded by Alexander the First, and these are the children of Malcolm the Third. Now that's the Malcolm from Macbeth, if you know your Shakespeare, but he's not really the mild meek lamb of the play. He's a horrendous, brutal warrior and a kind of statesman, and it's him who probably brings Stirling, the Lothians, firmly under Scotland's control, and to kind of secure Stirling, because Stirling sits at the lowest crossing point of the Forth. So if you want to go north, or if you want to stop someone going north, you do it at Stirling, and there's no other place in Scotland where so much blood and treasure has been shed to control such a small place. So this Edgar's Tower, which is probably a big tower, a chapel built by those very early kings. Probably lots of timber there, and all of that is destroyed by Robert the Bruce. So we can find other examples. I think I mentioned Bamborough is possibly a contender for what Stirling looked like. Now, as I say, Bruce burns it all down, and then even if that wasn't so bad, there's a Victorian fire which burns down lots of other stuff, and then the Stuart kings, running from James I to James VI, extensively rework all of that area. So the King's Old Buildings, the chapel of James VI, of course James IV's Great Hall, and then James V's Palace. There is nothing left because the whole thing has been reworked into a palace. So, and we've even lost the intermediate phase, because during the Second Wars of Independence it's the English that rebuild Stirling Castle and have to be forcibly ejected from it. I mean, there's another horrendous series of bloody sieges.
A great deal of your book is given over to a really interesting walk around the Stirling area, which looks at a variety of different locations which have particular significance relating to the Wars of Independence. Now, for me, somebody who's lived and worked in Stirling for many years, one of the things I found most fascinating about it was not just those areas like Balquidder Wood, which are very specifically related to the Wars of Independence, but places like, for instance, the Old Roman Roads. These were all new to me.
Yes, so I mean, I think that the book actually had its inspiration in the first phase of COVID lockdown, and I thought I would walk the battlefield and I'd actually try and see everything that was connected, and there are clearly things that are there when Bruce was there. St Ninian's Church, Balquidder, as you say, and these things are well known. There are then things that perhaps have a later tradition attached to them. So the Randolph Field stones are quite possibly are connected with a clash on day one between Thomas Randolph, Earl of Murray, and Sir Robert Clifford, and there are two standing stones. What age are the standing stones? Legend has it that they're connected to the Battle of Bannockburn, and they were either there or they were used. And an excavation of these that I did to test this actually demonstrated that they weren't prehistoric at all, although they have a kind of a lunar alignment on them, which is very strange. But they're actually probably connected to the battle. Then there are other locations that nobody ever visits, but which play a key role. So Coxet Hill, which is probably the camp for the Scottish troops on day one of the battle. But I also visit other locations like Gillies Hill, which everybody thinks is connected to the battle, but which there's no evidence. But why is that? And I think this then brings in a kind of another strand to the book, which is I like to draw attention to the poetry that the Bannockburn has inspired. And one of the reasons Gillies Hill is so firmly fixed in people's mind, of course, Gilly is a corruption of Gaelic for servant, so the connection to the small folk who Bruce leaves behind on day one, but actually play a kind of key role on day two. So the reason that Gillies Hill gets focused on is because Walter Scott writes a blockbuster poem about all of this, and you have a series of poems. Some are written contemporarily, so Robert Baston, who is an English monk, an English friar, Carmelite friar, who is there to document the battle on behalf of Edward II, is captured by the Scots, and Bruce gets him to write a poem. And this is a first-hand account of the battle. There's then a hagiography of Robert the Bruce's life by John Barber, which again celebrates it, but that's very one-handed because it doesn't include Wallace. Astonishing. There are then later ones like Blind Harry's Wallace, which inspired Braveheart. Then obviously Scots Wha Hae by Robert Burns, but then going all the way through things like the Corries. And what's astonishing is that inspiration, those locations, those individuals, we can actually follow them on the ground, which is that kind of key to the book.
And you also raise a really interesting historical curio that has a modern twist, and that's the Bonnety tree.
Yes, so now the Bonnety tree is on, or was on Gillies Hills. It was a massive Scots pine, and in theory it's where the small folk left their bonnets, so Bonnety tree, before they headed to engage with the English army on day 2. And this tree was pulled down, demolished during the construction of Gillies Hill quarry, which is actively opposed by lots of local groups, but a seedling from the tree has been replanted and is on the corner of Gillies Hill, and actually you can see the tree, the seedling, and it's in the walk. I mean, it might be worth talking a little bit about the small folk. So what is happening is that day 2 of the battle. So day 1 of the battle is planned. Bruce plans it to, and within an inch of its life. He has drilled his troops, he's dug pits, he knows where the English are coming, he knows when they're arriving, and in effect, day 1 is Bruce giving the English a bloody nose. That's what it is. Strategically, it's not very important. The bulk of the English army haven't fought. They've actually spent the day resting. They're still going to get to the castle, but Bruce is making it harder for them. And then you have day 2, which is unplanned, which Bruce doesn't know. Now, if Bruce dies on day 2, that's it. He dies with the cause, but equally he has to fight, because he's assembled his biggest ever army. He's not, strictly speaking, the legitimate king, and that's a podcast in and of itself. He killed the Red Comyn under a flag of truce on holy ground. He's excommunicated. So Bruce has to win to prove that he's the king, that he's the rightful king, that God believes in him, and everybody's Catholic at this point. So he is winning on day 2, incredibly, and the book explores what's going on with that. But again, it might just be a win. It might be a technical win. It's not a rout. All the English have to do is get to the castle, which they control, and you're back to square one. You've not inflicted a material loss on the English. It's always technical at this point. And what seems to happen is that the small folk, the camp followers, people who Bruce didn't want with him because they hadn't been trained, they see how the battle is turning and decide to intervene. And importantly, from Coxet Hill down to the Carse, where we think the bulk of day 2 was fought, the small folk are arriving from the west, i.e. between the English and the castle, and the appearance of what appears to be a new force panics the English, and you get a rout instead of an ordered retreat, which was entirely possible. And that's what transforms Bannockburn. That's what makes Bannockburn the single most incredible, the single most important battle in Scottish history. And that's why the small folk are so famed in Scottish history.
Now, the historical walk that you've created takes place over 5 separate stages. And what I like most about it is the fact that whether you're somebody who lives in the area like myself, or whether you're somebody who's perhaps new to Stirling or even new to Scotland, there's so much to learn about Scottish history on that route, and so many different places and events to find out about. What would you say stands out for you as being the highlights of that route?
Well, oh dear, you've put me on the spot there, Tom. I think it has to be the castle. The castle sits at the centre of the walk. And the walk was designed in stages so that you could either do it in a very long day, or 2 reasonable days, or actually just do them section at a time. But the castle is there to control the crossing point. Both battles are about the crossing point. Control of Scotland is about the crossing point at Stirling. Stirling itself, Stirling in Gaelic, probably means the lowest crossing point of the Forth, the point that's navigable to. So everything is about the crossing point, and the castle is about the crossing point. And let's be clear, that castle That's one of the finest Renaissance palaces in Europe. This is the last gasp of the pomp and ceremony of an independent Scotland before the Union of the Crowns. The reason that the castle is so well preserved is because the Stuart kings lost interest because they got the English crown, and they just left. So you have this absolutely astonishing castle in an absolutely astonishing location. There's incredible 360 views across the low-lying Carse, which was flooded 10,000 years ago, and the difficulty of crossing that and the Forth means that Stirling is the pinch point. Stirling is the most important place in Scottish history. It's where everybody has to go, and why I would say, it's the anvil of Scottish history.
Well, Murray, thanks very much for having joined us today and for discussing what I think is a really fresh and exciting new take on one of the most significant turning points in Scotland's history. If you're new to the area, or if you're coming to Scotland on holiday, I really hope that you will have a look at this book and consider carefully all the various different places around the area that have significance, because the book is fully illustrated. It comes with really colourful and interesting maps which will denote the various different places along the route and help you to make the most of your journey, and one which I hope that you'll certainly find to be of interest.
Thanks very much, Tom, and I hope everybody enjoys the book.
Murray's book, Bannockburn and Stirling Bridge, is available to buy now from all good independent booksellers and online retailers worldwide. Thanks for joining us today. I hope that you'll tune in again soon.
If you would like to find out more about advertising on the Extremis Publishing podcast, please visit their website at www.extremispublishing.com for details.